Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Can we
Shall we
start?
start working, I guess?
Distinguished
Mr.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the negotiations with US President Donald Trump have been held in a sincere and straightforward manner. I believe they've been very successful and useful. We reviewed the current status and the prospects of Russian-US ties, and also the key issues of the international agenda. It's obvious that bilateral ties are undergoing a difficult stage, but these difficulties and tension between our countries do not have any objective grounds for it. The Cold War is long over, and times of the ideological confrontation is in the past. The situation in the world has drastically changed. Today, both Russia and the US are facing completely new challenges.
Those include
including dangerous debalancing of international mechanisms of global security, regional crises, the spread of terrorism and transport of crime,
it's the snowballing,
and also mounting difficulties in the economy, environmental issues and other threats. And we can only overcome these issues if we stand together, and I hope that we'll reach this understanding with our US counterparts. Today's negotiations reflected our shared wish to improve the negative trend and to identify the first steps to change it, to make confident steps to go back to the previous level across all the issues. As biggest nuclear powers, we have the responsibility for global security. I feel it is important, and we talked about it, to establish dialogue on strategic security and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We've handed over a list of proposals to our US counterparts on this regard. We believe it's important to continue working together along the military, political and the disarmament agenda. We need to extend the agreement on strategic weapons, and that's the New START treaty. We also have issues about the US missile shield, the INF treaty. We also need to talk about the issues related to the deployment of weapons in space. We favor continued cooperation in fighting terrorism jointly and in providing cybersecurity. And our security agencies have been working successfully, and the recent example is our cooperation with security officers from the US as part of the FIFA 2018 World Cup that concluded yesterday. We need to make it a systemic effort, and I reminded the US President to re-establish our anti-terror group. We also talked about regional crisis. We don't have the same approach on all the crises, but we still have a lot of shared interests. We need to be looking for points of convergence. We need to be working together in a closer way, including at international forum. We also talked about regional crises, including Syria. As for Syria, we need to establish peace and accord, and it could be the role model of our joint cooperation. Russia and the US can definitely take leadership in this area and establish interaction to avoid and overcome the humanitarian crisis and help refugees go back to their homes. And in order to provide for a constructive cooperation in Syria. We have all the necessary components. Russian and US military officers have very good experience in terms of coordination. They have established very good channels of communication that help to avert collision and unnecessary dangerous incidents on the ground and in the air. Now, after terrorists were destroyed in the southern zone, the situation in the Golan Heights should be restored in line with the 1974 treaty. It would help to ease tension in the Golan Heights and ease tension between Syria and Israel and provide security for the state of Israel. And distinguished Mr. President paid particular attention to it. And I'd like to reaffirm that Russia is interested in it and will stick to this policy going forward. This will help to pave for an equitable peace and security based on a UN Security Council resolution. It's good that the Korean Peninsula issues are finally being resolved, and to a large extent it's been possible thanks to President Trump's personal activities. He's been focused on easing tension and on a confrontation. We also talked about the US decision to pull out of the Iranian deal. I'd like to confirm once again that Iran has been the country that's been under the biggest scrutiny of the IAEA, and that has helped to protect the non-proliferation treaty. We also discussed Ukraine. We looked at the need for conscientious implementation of the Minsk Accords. The US could have been more affirmative in pushing the Ukrainian authorities to comply with the Minsk Accords. We also focus strongly on the economy. We do have interest for cooperation on both sides of the Atlantic. The US business delegation was one of the biggest ones at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum in May. It featured more than 500 senior executives from the US. We need to spur bilateral investments and trade, and in order to do this, we agreed to set up a high-level working group that would combine captains of industry from both countries. Business leaders know better how to establish cooperation in trade and investment, so let them think hard about it and provide proposals on that score. US President raised the issue of the so-called alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 election, and I had to repeat what I said several times, including at my one-on-one meetings with him. As I said, Russia has never interfered and will never interfere with US domestic affairs, including the election campaign. And if there is any evidence, we are ready to review it together, especially as part of the cybersecurity group that needs to be set up. We discussed that earlier. And we also need to defreeze US and Russia ties in the humanitarian area and in terms of civil society. We received a delegation of US congressmen, and that was perceived as an extraordinary event, but that should actually become a usual routine effort. And that's why we asked US President Donald Trump to think about the philosophy and the vision for our ties going forward. We need to engage experts who know a lot about the history and the specifics of the Russian and US relationship. We need to engage influential influential scholars, former diplomats and military officers, historians who would try to identify points of convergence and ways to reverse the negative trend and move towards a sustainable upward trend. Overall, we are satisfied with the one-on-one meeting. Previously, we had meetings during international fora. We had a very good conversation, and I hope that we achieved a better understanding, and I really appreciate Donald Trump's effort. Without doubt, there's still a lot of issues we're not able to clear up, but it's a very important first step in this direction. And finally, I'd like to say that the establishment of the working environment has been largely due to our Finnish hosts. We really appreciate the efforts of the Helsinki residents, of the nation of Finland. We are sorry for the inconvenience to the residents of Helsinki. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have just concluded a meeting with President Putin on a wide range of critical issues for both of our countries. We had direct, open, deeply productive dialogue. Went very well. Before I begin, I want to thank President Niinistö of Finland for graciously hosting today's summit. President Putin and I were saying how lovely it was and what a great job they did. I also want to congratulate Russia and President Putin for having done such an excellent job in hosting the World Cup. It was really one of the best ever, and your team also did very well. It was a great job. I'm here today to continue the proud tradition of bold American diplomacy. From the earliest days of our republic, American leaders have understood that diplomacy and engagement is preferable to conflict and hostility. A productive dialogue is not only good for the United States and good for Russia, but it is good for the world. The disagreements between our two countries are well known, and President Putin and I discussed them at length today. But if we're going to solve many of the problems facing our world, then we're going to have to find ways to cooperate in pursuit of shared interests. Too often in both recent past and long ago, we have seen the consequences when diplomacy is left on the table. We have also seen the benefits of cooperation. In the last century, our nations fought alongside one another in the Second World War. Even during the tensions of the Cold War, when the world looked much different than it does today, the United States and Russia were able to maintain a strong dialogue. But our relationship has never been worse than it is now. However, that changed as of about 4 hours ago. I really believe that. Nothing would be easier politically than to refuse to meet, to refuse to engage, but that would not accomplish anything. As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. Constructive dialogue between the United States and Russia affords the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics. As president, I will always put what is best for America and what is best for the American people. During today's meeting, I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. I felt this was a message best delivered in person. Spent a great deal of time talking about it, and President Putin may very well want to address it, and very strongly, because he feels very strongly about it, and he has an interesting idea. We also discussed one of the most critical challenges facing humanity, nuclear proliferation. I provided an update on my meeting last month with Chairman Kim on the denuclearization of North Korea, and after today, I am very sure that President Putin and Russia want very much to end that problem, going to work with us, and I appreciate that commitment. The President and I also discussed the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism. Both Russia and the United States have suffered horrific terrorist attacks, and we have agreed to maintain open communication between our security agencies to protect our citizens from this global menace. Last year, we told Russia about a planned attack in St. Petersburg, and they were able to stop it cold. They found them, they stopped them, there was no doubt about it. I appreciated President Putin's phone call afterwards to thank me. I also emphasized the importance of placing pressure on Iran to halt its nuclear ambitions and to stop its campaign of violence throughout the area, throughout the Middle East. As we discussed at length, the crisis in Syria is a complex one. Cooperation between our two countries has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives. I also made clear that the United States will not allow Iran to benefit from our successful campaign against ISIS. We have just about eradicated ISIS in the area. We also agreed that representatives from our national security councils will meet to follow up on all of the issues we addressed today and to continue the progress we have started right here in Helsinki. Today's meeting is only the beginning of a longer process, but we have taken the first steps toward a brighter future and one with a strong dialogue and a lot of thought. Our expectations are grounded in realism, but our hopes are grounded in America's desire for friendship, cooperation, and peace. And I think I can speak on behalf of Russia when I say that also. President Putin, I want to thank you again for joining me for these important discussions and for advancing open dialogue between Russia and the United States. Our meeting carries on a long tradition of diplomacy between Russia, the United States, for the greater good of all. And this was a very constructive day. This was a very constructive few hours that we spent together. It's in the interest of both of our countries to continue our conversation, and we have agreed to do so. I'm sure we'll be meeting again in the future, often, and hopefully we will solve every one of the problems that we discussed today. So, again, President Putin, thank you very much.
Right now, journalists would be able to ask 2 questions. So we start with journalists from the Kremlin pool. Please introduce yourself. My name is Alexei Meshkov, Interfax News Agency. I have a president to US President Donald Trump. During your European tour, you said that the implementation of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline projects makes Europe a captive of Europe, and you wanted to help Europe to get rid of this dependence by supplying LNG, American LNG. But this cold winter proved that the current energy security system is really better than what you're offering. And the US had to buy additional volumes of gas, including from Russia. So, do you think that your proposal could lead to a gap in the energy security system and will make Europeans more exposed? And my second question, you called President Putin competitor earlier, but you said that you'd be able to become friends with him. Have you achieved that?
A competitor, and a good competitor he is. And I think the word competitor is it's a compliment. I think that we will be competing when you talk about the pipeline. I'm not sure necessarily that it's in the best interests of Germany or not, but that was a decision that they made. We'll be competing. As you know, the United States is now, or soon will be, but I think it actually is right now the largest in the oil and gas world. So we're going to be selling LNG, and we'll have to be competing with the pipeline. And I think we'll compete successfully, although there is a little advantage locationally. So I just wish them luck. I mean, I did. I discussed with Angela Merkel in pretty strong tones, but I also know where they're all coming from. And they have a very close source. So we'll see how that all works out. But we have lots of sources now, and the United States is much different than it was a number of years ago when we weren't able to extract what we can extract today. So today we're number one in the world at that, and I think we'll be out there competing very strongly. Thank you very much.
Just one remark. We discussed this issue with the US President. We are aware of the stance of the US. The US is also a major oil and gas country. We believe we can work together to regulate global markets because we don't want a drastic cut in the price, and our producers will suffer from that, and including US producers, I mean shale gas producers. We don't want the price to fall too much because otherwise production is not profitable anymore. And we are not interested in exceedingly high prices because refinery and machine building will be killed. So we do have joint areas that we can discuss. Now, going back to Nord Stream 2, the US President expressed concerns over possible disappearance of transit via Ukraine. I assured him that we are ready to go on with transit via Ukraine, and we are ready to extend the contract if the issues resolved at the Stockholm Court of Arbitration between Gazprom and Naftogaz.
To Jeff Mason from Reuters.
Thank you. Mr. President, you tweeted this morning that it's U.S. foolishness, stupidity, and the Mueller probe that is responsible for the decline in U.S. relations with Russia. Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular? And if so, what would you consider them that they are responsible for?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago, a long time, frankly, before I got to office. And I think we're all to blame. I think that the United States now has stepped forward along with Russia, and we're getting together, and we have a chance to do some great things, whether it's nuclear proliferation in terms of stopping. We have to do it. Ultimately, that's probably the most important thing that we can be working on. But I do feel that we have both made some mistakes. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it. People are being brought out to the fore. So far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign, and they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign. I beat Hillary Clinton easily, and frankly, we beat her, and I'm not even saying from the standpoint, we won that race, and it's a shame that there can even be a little bit of a cloud over it. People know that, people understand it, but the main thing, and we discussed this also, is zero collusion. And it has had a negative impact upon the relationship of the two largest nuclear powers in the world. We have 90% of nuclear power between the two countries. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what's going on with the probe.
For President Putin, if I could follow up as well, why should Americans and why should President Trump believe your statement that Russia did not intervene in the 2016 election, given the evidence that U.S. intelligence agencies have provided? And will you consider extraditing the 12 Russian officials that were indicted last week by a U.S. grand jury?
Well, I'm going to let the President answer the second part of that question. But as you know, the whole concept of that came up perhaps a little bit before, but it came out as a reason why the Democrats lost an election, which, frankly, they should have been able to win because the Electoral College is much more advantageous for Democrats, as you know, than it is to Republicans. We won the Electoral College by a lot, 306 to 223, I believe, and that was a well-fought battle. We did a great job, and frankly, I'm going to let the President speak to the second part of your question, but just to say it one time again, and I say it all the time, there was no collusion. I didn't know the President. There was nobody to collude with. There was no collusion with the campaign. And every time you hear all of these, 12 and 14, it's stuff that has nothing to do, and frankly, they admit, these are not people involved in the campaign. But to the average reader out there, they're saying, well, maybe that does. It doesn't. And even the people involved, some perhaps told mis-stories, although in one case the FBI said there was no lie. There was no lie. Somebody else said there was. We ran a brilliant campaign, and that's why I'm president. Thank you.
Now, going back on credibility, is there any credibility? Well, you cannot trust anyone. Why do you feel that President Trump trusts me, or did I trust him fully? He defends the interests of the United States of America. I defend the interests of Russia. We do have points of convergence, and we're looking for shared interests. There are issues where we are not on the same page, and we're trying to find ways to make our work constructive. We should not rely on short-term political goals by some political forces. We should rely on evidence. Can you name at least one piece of evidence that points to any kind of collusion during the race? This was absurd. We didn't know each other. The President just said that. There was some particular opinion in the Russian society concerning one particular candidate. Presidential candidate Donald Trump was talking about the need to re-establish political ties with Russia. And that led to the fact that there was an opinion among Russian people that he's the preferred candidate. It's natural to have a liking towards someone who wants to build better ties with another country. As for the accusations against Concord, well, Concord hired the lawyers, and basically what's happening is that the entire charges are collapsing. So just look at what's happening at the court proceedings. So that's what you have to rely on. Now, going back to the indictment of 12 Russian security services, I need to look into it. I'm not really aware of what's behind it. But the President did raise this issue. Now, here's what I can propose. We do have an existing treaty between Russia and the United States that was signed in 1999, and that's a treaty for mutual facilitation on criminal cases. And that's been an effective treaty. And upon a request from foreign authorities. We open up to 150 criminal cases. And as you might remember, a former nuclear power minister was extradited from the US to Russia, and he was prosecuted here. And there's a formal procedure that is part of this treaty. So your commission, led by Mr. Mueller, so that probe could send an official request to Russia so that we hold investigation or in questioning of those individuals, and our prosecutor general's officers will look into it. They will hold the questioning and will then send all those materials to the US. And we can even make another step forward. We can also invite US official representatives, including the members of the Mueller probe. We can invite them to be present during the questioning. But if that takes place, then it must be a two-way street. We would also expect from the US to question those officials, including from the security services, that we believe are behind illegal activities on the territory of the Russian Federation, with the presence of our investigators. Now, what do I mean by that? You might remember the notorious Hermitage Capital case owned by Mr. Browder. According to our investigators, a group of people, his business associates, illegally earned more than $1.5 billion US. They didn't pay a cent of taxes, but they transferred the money to the US. And they also donated $400 million to the Clinton campaign. $400 million. Well, they might have done it legally, but they earned that money illegally. And we do have evidence to believe that some of the US security services have helped Browder to conduct those illegal transfers. But that's just one step. We can talk about expanding our cooperation. There are multiple options. They are on the table, and they are part of the
did you want President Trump
treaty.
To win the election, and did you direct any of your officials to help him do that?
Yes, I wanted him to win, because he talked about the need to normalize US-Russian ties. Well, let us continue. I think we can take up to 3 questions. RT, go ahead. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ilya Petrenko. Represent RT.
For Mr. Trump in English. Mr. President, would you please go into the details of possibly any specific arrangements for the U.S. to work together with Russia in Syria, if any of these kind of arrangements were made today or discussed?
Now, if you allow me, Mr. President of Russia, a question in Russian. Now, we mentioned World Cup several times. Mr. Pompeo earlier said that when we talk about cooperation in Syria, the ball is on the side of Russia. Is it correct? And if so, what's your next step?
Well, I guess I'll answer the first part of the question. We've worked with Israel long and hard for many years, many decades. I think we've never has any country been closer than we are. President Putin also is helping Israel, and we both spoke with Bibi Netanyahu, and they would like to do certain things with respect to Syria, having to do with the safety of Israel. So in that respect, we absolutely would like to work in order to help Israel, and Israel will be working with us, so both countries would work jointly. And I think that when you look at all of the progress that's been made in certain sections with the eradication of ISIS, we're about 98%, 99% there, and other things that have taken place that we've done, and that, frankly, Russia has helped us with in certain respects. But I think that working with Israel is a great thing, and creating safety for Israel is something that both President Putin and I would like to see very much. One little thing I might add to that is the helping of people, because you have such horrible, if you see, and I've seen reports and I've seen pictures, I've seen just about everything. And if we can do something to help the people of Syria get back into some form of shelter and on a humanitarian basis, and that's what the word was, really, a humanitarian basis. I think that both of us would be very interested in doing that, and we will do that. Okay? Thank you very much.
Excuse me, but for now, no specific agreements, for instance, between the militaries?
Well, our militaries do get along. In fact, our militaries actually have gotten along probably better than our political leaders for years, but our militaries do get along very well, and they do coordinate in Syria and other places. Okay? Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, we discussed a humanitarian area in Syria, and I discussed the same issue with French President Macron yesterday, and we agreed that we will step up our efforts with European countries, including with France, and we are ready to provide our cargo planes to deliver humanitarian aid, and we discussed it too with US President Trump. So there's a lot to work on here. Now, what's important is that there's so many refugees holed up in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria's neighboring states. If we provide them assistance so they could go back to their homes, that the migration pressure on European countries and other countries will decrease many times. So I feel it's very important from all the perspectives, both from the humanitarian perspective and also to ease the situation with refugees. And overall, I agree with US presidents that our military have been working hard together, and they've been getting along, and I hope that this will be the case going forward. We'll also continue working together as part of the Astana format, Russia, Turkey and Iran, but we're ready to align these efforts with the efforts of the so-called smaller group of states, so that this process would kick off and that we have the best chances for the ultimate success. Now, as for the ball is on our side, the football metaphor you used, the US President just said that we've finally conducted the World Cup. Now I'd like to give the ball to the US President Trump. Now the ball is on his side. The US is expected to host the 2026 World Cup.
We do host it, and we hope we do as good a job. That's very nice. That will go to my son Barron. We have no question. In fact, Melania, here you go. Okay.
The final question from the United States will go to Jonathan Lemire from the AP.
Thank you. Question for each president. President Trump, yes. You first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee. I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails, gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer. Okay? Thank you.
Allow me to add a remark. As you know, I was also a security officer, and I know how dossiers, how these reports are drafted. Secondly, I believe Russia is a democratic state, and I am sure that you believe that the US is a democratic state. Is it? Well, if it is so, then the ultimate decision in this dispute can only be established by court and not by security services. Now, the company called Concord is charged with interference, but they don't represent the Russian state. I've given many examples. You have many people. Take Mr. Soros, a billionaire. He's been interfering everywhere. But is this the official position of the US state? This is the position of an individual. The same could be applied here. The ultimate verdict can be only provided by court. And again, it applies only to individuals. It has nothing to do with the state. And the final indictment regarding our security officers. Again, we do have a mutual treaty. Send us an official request. Let the Mueller Commission send us an official request. We'll do our part of the job and we'll reply. And we can expand our cooperation, as I said. But again, it should be a two-way street. We'll also expect access provided by the US to those individuals that we feel are also part of the security services. Let's talk in details. Let's not use the Russian-US ties as a bargaining chip in US domestic affairs.
For President Putin, thank you. Two questions for you, sir. Can you tell me what President Trump may have indicated to you about officially recognizing Crimea as part of Russia? And then secondly, sir, does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
US President Donald Trump's position is well known on Crimea, and he's been sticking to it. He says Crimea has been taken illegally. We have a different opinion. We believe that we held a referendum in line with the rules and procedures of UN. So for us, this issue is closed. Now, as for compromising materials, well, I heard about it. There's been an allegation that we compiled a dossier on Trump when he came over to Moscow. My colleague, when Trump came over to Moscow, I was not aware of it. I respect President Trump as head of the United States, but when he came over as a businessman, I was not even aware that he's in Moscow. Take the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. More than 500 senior executives from the US came over to Russia. I don't even remember all of the names. Do you feel that we are compiling compromising materials in all of them? Well, it's definitely absurd. I cannot really imagine anything more absurd than this. So please throw out this nonsense out of your heads.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago. And if anybody watched Peter Strzok testify over the last couple of days, and I was in Brussels watching it, it was a disgrace to the FBI. It was a disgrace to our country. And you would say that was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.